My name is Maya. I'm with No One Is Illegal Toronto. No One Is Illegal. We fight for migrant justice because we know that migrants do some of the most important work in our community. We know that these systems would rather have migrants and refugees live as second and third class citizens. Shame. Shame. Able to labor on these lands but never able to receive protection, dignity, or justice. Shame. Shame. Who gets access and safety falls along racial and economic lines. And who gets abused, interrogated, detained, sometimes indefinitely, and ripped from their families is decided by the state. Shame. Shame. The state decides who is deserving of access, but migrants and refugees are not illegal. This settler government is illegal. The legal system is not set up for justice, but rather to protect a settler government that continues sanctioned exploitation like mining and resource extraction, purchasing pipelines, devastating territories without consent. This settler state protects the police as they carry out violence and murder with impunity against Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples. Shame. Shame. We must listen to Indigenous leaders and work with communities in solidarity to protect the land and to bring justice. We must strive for a world where families have the freedom to move, the freedom to return, and the freedom to stay. Now I'm gonna read words that are on behalf of a mother who cannot actually stand here and read this statement publicly because precarity and being able to speak in public is an incredible privilege. Guadalupe is an activist mother who is part of the non-status women's collective in Montreal, who was forced to live away from her son 4 years ago and her son to live without his mother and sister. Her son did not identify himself when he was detained to protect his mother and sister because he knew that if they were returned to Mexico, all their lives would be in danger. Her daughter cannot go to school because she is already of legal age and it's very expensive, and they do not have access to medical services unless they pay. Guadalupe says, Canada speaks to the world as a solidarity country that helps and opens the doors of those in need and helps refugees and expresses disagreement with policies like Trump. But I am a woman who came here asking for help 10 years ago, applied for humanitarian reasons, and was denied status. My son was rejected by the school authorities because he did not have papers. Shame. The city police entered his secondary school and arrested him as an adult. He was 16 years old. Shame. Despite his disability, he was arrested and detained for 15 days. Shame. Shame. When they deported him to Mexico, they wanted to hand him over to an orphanage, knowing his family was in Canada. Shame. Shame. After this, a great mobilization happened and there was still no response from the authorities or human rights organizations. I can say that it is a lie that Canada does not separate families. When my son was detained, he witnessed other children imprisoned, deprived of their freedom. Shame. Shame! The family unit is one of the most important to us, and keeping parents and children together is important above all things. Why do we not help those who arrive in Canada asking for help, those who have fled? Shame. Shame. We want answers, and we want actions that reflect these policies. The situation is serious and outrageous because Guadalupe and her family are not the only ones in Canada. A large number of migrants are forced to live separated from their loved ones, children separated from their parents. Shame. Shame. In Canada, there are migrants detained indefinitely. There are minors detained. There are families detained. In Canada, dozens of people have died while in detention centers due to lack of medical aid and psychological care. Shame. Shame. We demand that the United States end all immigration detentions, reunite families, and abolish ICE. At the same time, Canada must eliminate the Safe Third Country Agreement because the United States is not a safe place. Canada needs to erase the designated country of origin list where the government of Canada decides which places are dangerous and which places are not. We demand an end to quotas on numbers of refugees. We must open the border with the US and give status on arrival. When Trudeau says, I cannot imagine what these families are going through, we've never done things like this in Canada before, he's lying. Yeah! It's an insult to the indigenous families that for generations have suffered from the cruel separation of their families. Shame. Shame. We cannot and should not forget residential schools, the 60s scoop, and that to this day, indigenous children represent the majority of children who live separated from their families in foster care. Shame. Shame. It is an offense to the hundreds of thousands of undocumented families currently living in fear in Canada. Shame. Shame. We demand an end to the detention of migrants in Canada. We demand permanent residency for all undocumented people in Canada. End detentions, end detentions, end detentions, end detentions, end detentions, end detentions. Stop deporting people!
No one is illegal!
Thank you so much.